Welcome to the channel that cuts through the noise and brings you science-backed tools for real fat loss. No gimmicks, no guesswork. If you've been told it's all about counting calories or grinding in the gym, you're only seeing half the picture. Here, we explore how to activate your body's natural fat burning systems using simple, powerful strategies grounded in neuroscience and human physiology like cold exposure, caffeine timing, NEAT, and metabolic tools like Berberine and GLP-1 support. You'll learn how your nervous system drives fat metabolism, how to stack habits for maximum effect, and why sustainable results come from working with your biology, not against it. When we talk about fat loss, most people immediately think of diet plans, intense workouts, or cutting calories. And while those things certainly play a role, they often overlook something much more foundational: the nervous system. The truth is, your ability to burn fat is regulated not just by what you eat or how you move, but by how your brain and body communicate through your nervous system. At the core of this process is the sympathetic nervous system, sometimes referred to as the fight or flight system. This branch of the autonomic nervous system is responsible for activating the body when we need energy quickly, whether for movement, focus, or thermoregulation. And here's the key part. When the sympathetic system is activated, it triggers the release of adrenaline and noradrenaline, two catecholamines that play a direct role in fat metabolism. These chemicals bind to receptors on fat cells, especially those in what's called white adipose tissue, the type of fat most people are trying to lose. When this binding occurs, it signals those fat cells to break down triglycerides, the stored form of fat, into free fatty acids and glycerol, which can then be used by muscles and other tissues for fuel. In simple terms, the nervous system is telling the body, we need energy, release it now. And now, what's especially interesting is that this mechanism can be tapped into in ways that don't always involve traditional exercise. For instance, cold exposure, which we'll talk more about shortly, naturally stimulates this same pathway. Shivering, in particular, is a highly effective way to trigger adrenaline release and turn on fat burning processes. Even subtle movements like fidgeting or standing contribute to sympathetic activation, raising your baseline energy expenditure without structured workouts. There's also a strong connection between mental state and fat metabolism. When you're alert, focused, and engaged, which also reflects a mild level of sympathetic activation, your body is primed to mobilize fuel more efficiently. That's why stacking certain behaviors, like caffeine intake before a fasted workout, works so well. It not only enhances alertness, but also amplifies adrenaline release, further supporting fat breakdown. But it's important to recognize that this isn't about pushing your body into a constant state of stress. Chronic stress, especially the psychological kind, can backfire by disrupting hormonal balance and impairing sleep, both of which are essential for healthy metabolism. The goal is to create short, deliberate spikes in sympathetic activity through protocols like cold exposure, physical movement, or timed supplementation that signal the body to release fat stores without causing long-term dysregulation. So when we think about fat loss, we need to expand the lens. It's not just about burning calories through exercise or eating, less it's about understanding how the nervous system orchestrates the entire process, and how we can use specific tools to guide it in the right direction. One of the most effective and frankly underused tools for fat loss is deliberate cold exposure. This includes protocols like cold showers, ice baths, or even exposure to cold outdoor environments with minimal clothing. And while it might seem counterintuitive or even uncomfortable at first, the underlying physiology reveals why this method is so powerful for shifting the body into a fat-burning state. When the body is exposed to cold, it responds by activating something called brown adipose tissue, or BAT. Unlike white fat, which stores energy, brown fat burns energy. It's packed with mitochondria, the energy factories of our cells, which give it its darker color and its thermogenic properties. In essence, brown fat's job is to generate heat, a process known as non-shivering thermogenesis, which helps maintain your core body temperature when exposed to cold environments. This thermogenic activity doesn't just create warmth, it also increases overall energy expenditure. That means your body starts pulling more fuel from fat stores to meet the energy demand. It's a natural, built-in metabolic enhancer. What's especially interesting is that this activation of brown fat can continue even after you've stepped out of the cold environment. Studies have shown that repeated exposure to cold, even just a few times a week, can increase the density and activity of brown fat over time, essentially training your body to become more metabolically efficient. But there's another layer to this. When the cold is intense enough to trigger shivering, you get a secondary fat burning effect. Shivering itself is a form of muscular activity, and while it's involuntary, it significantly increases calorie burn. What's fascinating is that shivering also leads to a spike in adrenaline and other catecholamines, further stimulating the breakdown of white fat into usable energy. It's this coupling of brown fat activation and sympathetic nervous system engagement that makes cold exposure such a potent fat loss tool. Now, it's important to approach this in a structured and sustainable way. We're not talking about extreme ice baths every morning. Even short durations, 2 to 5 minutes of cold shower exposure, particularly to the upper back and neck, can be enough to stimulate brown fat and engage the sympathetic nervous system. If practiced regularly, this form of cold exposure becomes not just tolerable, but actually invigorating. You're training your nervous system, your metabolism, and your mental resilience all at once. The key is consistency and control, using cold exposure as a tool, not a punishment. When implemented correctly, it doesn't just support fat loss through calorie expenditure, it reshapes how your body handles energy overall. You're building a more metabolically active system, one that burns more fat even at rest. And over time, this adds up in ways that are both measurable and sustainable. Caffeine is one of the most widely consumed psychoactive substances in the world, and it's also one of the most studied in the context of fat metabolism. When used strategically, it becomes a powerful tool not just for enhancing alertness, but for accelerating the breakdown of stored fat. The key lies in how caffeine interacts with the nervous system, particularly when it's timed correctly before physical activity. When you ingest caffeine, especially in the form of coffee or a supplement, it begins acting within about 20 to 30 minutes, reaching peak levels in the bloodstream around 60 to 90 minutes. During that window, it exerts its effects by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain. That's what makes you feel more awake, but more importantly, for fat loss, it triggers a rise in adrenaline. That spike in adrenaline isn't just about feeling energized. It's a direct biochemical signal to mobilize fat stores. Adrenaline binds to receptors on fat cells, particularly in white adipose tissue, initiating the breakdown of triglycerides into free fatty acids that can then be used for fuel. This fat mobilizing effect becomes even more potent when you combine caffeine with physical movement, especially moderate intensity exercise like brisk walking, zone 2 cardio, or steady state cycling. The muscles are demanding fuel, the nervous system is driving adrenaline release, and the caffeine is amplifying that signal. The result is a highly effective fat burning window where your body is efficiently converting stored fat into usable energy. Now, the timing and context are critical. Consuming caffeine in a fasted state, meaning before you've had any food, typically in the morning, enhances this effect significantly. When you're fasted, insulin levels are low, and the body is already primed to use stored fat as a primary fuel source. Adding caffeine to that state increases the amplitude of the fat mobilizing response. It's like adding a booster to a system that's already moving in the right direction. It's worth noting that the dose matters. Typically, a dose of around 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight is used in research settings, but most people can experience benefits with lower amounts, especially if they're caffeine sensitive. That said, the goal is not to rely on high doses, but to use caffeine strategically on days when you're training, ideally in the morning or early afternoon to avoid disrupting sleep, and paired with activity that keeps you in the fat oxidation zone. This protocol isn't about short-term stimulation, it's about stacking physiological conditions in your favor. By aligning caffeine intake with the body's natural fat, burning pathways through fasted exercise and sympathetic nervous system activation, you create an internal environment where stored fat is more readily accessed and utilized. It's simple, accessible, and when done consistently, it has a measurable impact on body composition. When we think about fat loss, the conversation often revolves around structured exercise, hitting the gym, running, lifting weights, and so on. But there's an entire category of movement that operates in the background of our daily lives, often unnoticed, yet it has a profound impact on energy expenditure. This is what's referred to as non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. And it may be one of the most underappreciated tools for sustainable fat loss. NEAT includes all the subtle forms of movement that aren't considered formal exercise. Things like standing instead of sitting, walking from room to room, pacing while on a phone call, cleaning the kitchen, fidgeting with your hands, tapping your feet. These might seem insignificant on their own, but over the course of hours, days, and weeks, they add up to a substantial amount of caloric burn. In fact, research shows that NEAT can account for hundreds of additional calories burned per day, depending on your baseline activity level and behavior patterns. What makes NEAT especially powerful is that it's sustainable and low effort. It doesn't require changing clothes, driving to a gym, or blocking out an hour in your schedule. It simply involves becoming more intentional about inserting movement into the everyday fabric of your life. Standing up to take phone calls, walking to run errands instead of driving when possible, choosing stairs over elevators. These aren't just lifestyle choices, they're metabolic strategies. There's a nervous system component to this as well. When you're moving throughout the day, you're maintaining a mild level of sympathetic nervous system engagement, not the high adrenaline output you'd get from intense exercise or cold exposure, but a more moderate, consistent signal that tells the body, we're active, we need fuel. That gentle stimulation nudges the body toward breaking down fat for energy, especially when combined with other tools like caffeine or cold exposure, which we've already discussed. Interestingly, people who are naturally lean often exhibit higher levels of NEAT without even realizing it. They may shift positions frequently, stand up more often, or pace when thinking. These unconscious habits contribute significantly to their overall energy balance, but the encouraging part is that NEAT can be trained. You can build it into your day through simple behavioral cues, setting a timer to stand every 30 minutes, taking a 5-minute walk after meals, or turning sedentary moments into micro opportunities for movement. This approach also dovetails well with fat loss strategies that prioritize consistency over intensity. While intense workouts are useful, they're typically short and infrequent. NEAT, on the other hand, spans the entire day. By layering it on top of other metabolic tools, it amplifies the effect of everything else you're doing. It becomes the quiet but constant contributor to your fat-burning system, always on, always working in the background. When it comes to fat loss, one of the most overlooked variables is metabolic control, how efficiently your body handles blood glucose, insulin, and satiety signals. Most people focus purely on caloric intake or exercise, but what's happening hormonally after a meal plays a massive role in whether those calories get stored or burned. This is where compounds like GLP-1 agonists and Berberine come into play, offering tools that support fat loss not by directly burning fat, but by shaping the internal environment that influences it. GLP-1, or glucagon, like peptide 1, is a hormone naturally released in the gut in response to food. Its role is multifaceted. It helps regulate insulin secretion, slows gastric emptying, and most notably, reduces appetite by sending signals of fullness to the brain. GLP-1 agonists, whether in pharmaceutical forms like semaglutide or through natural compounds like yerba mate, bitter melon, or dietary fiber, mimic or enhance these effects. The result is a reduction in overall hunger and improved control over food intake without the sharp dips and spikes in blood sugar that drive cravings. Berberine, on the other hand, is a plant-derived compound that works somewhat like metformin. It improves insulin sensitivity, particularly at the level of the liver and skeletal muscle, allowing your body to manage blood glucose more efficiently after meals. That's critical because when insulin sensitivity is low, a common issue with high body fat or sedentary behavior, the body tends to store more fat and burn less. By improving how your cells respond to insulin, Berberine helps redirect nutrients toward energy use rather than storage. Now, while neither of these tools will create dramatic fat loss on their own, they significantly improve the consistency and sustainability of a fat loss protocol. For example, reduced hunger means it's easier to adhere to a calorie deficit without the psychological battle of constant cravings. Better insulin sensitivity translates to more stable energy throughout the day, less reactive eating, and a stronger capacity to burn fat during periods of fasting or exercise. What's fascinating is that these compounds also support the nervous system indirectly. Stable blood sugar reduces sympathetic overactivation, the stress-driven spikes that lead to energy crashes and binge eating. That creates a more balanced state where your metabolic machinery can operate efficiently and fat oxidation becomes more consistent. And just like with other tools, cold exposure, caffeine, the power lies in how you stack them, using berberine in the evening after a higher carbohydrate meal or pairing GLP-1. Enhancing foods with time-restricted eating sets up your body to stay in a fat-accessible state more often. The result is less friction, more adherence, and a physiology that supports fat loss rather than fighting against it. It's about working with your biology instead of trying to out-discipline it. One of the biggest misconceptions in the health and fitness world is the idea that there's a single magic solution for fat loss. People often latch onto one strategy, maybe it's intermittent fasting, a supplement, or a new workout trend, and expect transformative results. But the reality is, no single tool, no matter how effective, works in isolation to create sustained, healthy fat loss. The real leverage comes from stacking tools, combining methods that each target different physiological pathways, and using them in a way that aligns with how your body is naturally designed to operate. Let's take a closer look at what that actually means. If you're using cold exposure, for example, even something as simple as a 3-minute cold shower in the morning, you're triggering the release of adrenaline, activating brown fat, and increasing thermogenesis. That's one layer. Now, if you add caffeine timed 60 to 90 minutes before movement or exercise, especially in a fasted state, you're stacking another layer, amplifying that adrenaline response and increasing the mobilization of stored fat. Next, you incorporate neat non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You stay on your feet more during the day, take walking meetings, pace while thinking, or stand while working. These movements may seem trivial on their own, but they keep the sympathetic nervous system lightly engaged and steadily raise energy expenditure. That's another layer: low effort, high yield. Now we bring in metabolic support compounds like berberine or GLP-1, enhancing nutrients. These don't increase fat burning directly, but they dramatically improve insulin sensitivity and satiety, helping you adhere to nutrition goals more effortlessly. And when these tools are combined with circadian alignment, moving your body during daylight hours, eating within a consistent daily window, and avoiding light exposure late at night, you start to reinforce the natural hormonal rhythms that support fat oxidation and metabolic health. Each of these tools on its own has value, but when you layer them intelligently, you're no longer relying on willpower. You're shifting the entire internal environment of your body toward one that favors fat mobilization, energy balance, and long-term adherence. And that's the key: not burning the most fat in a day, but building a system that does it consistently, without burnout or constant effort. This approach isn't just more effective, it's more sustainable. Because instead of pushing against your biology, you're working with it. You're creating conditions where fat loss becomes the natural side effect of how you live each day, rather than the result of extreme interventions. Small levers pulled in the right sequence produce outsized results. If you found this valuable, do me a favor, hit like and subscribe to the channel for more science-based tools to support your fat loss and metabolic health journey. Remember, it's not about chasing a perfect diet or punishing workouts. It's about stacking simple, proven tools like cold exposure, caffeine, movement, and smart compounds in a way that works with your nervous system and your life. New videos drop weekly, so stay tuned, stay consistent, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, stay adaptive,